morning, everyone. My name is Aleeza Dhillon, and I'm from the United States. Today, it's my honor to be presenting my project titled Investigating the Impact of the Big 5 Personality Traits on Teacher Burnout and Job Satisfaction among High School Educators to you all. This project was done with the help of my mentor, Dr. Ann Kever from the Keenan Research Center for Biomedical Science. The reason I chose to investigate teacher burnout is because it is a prevalent issue America faces today. 86% of educators have reported a negative impact on their mental health as a result of teaching, and a whopping 3 times as many educators in comparison to other service-related industry professionals reported feeling work-related stress that they are unable to manage. In turn, it is predicted that over the next 3 years, 810,000 educators will be leaving the educational profession in the United States. So before I begin talking about my project, I think it's important for me to explain all the components to you. The first is job burnout. Job burnout is defined as the prolonged response to chronic stressors in the workplace, and it has 3 sub-constructs: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. Emotional exhaustion is defined as the extent to which a person feels that their work is draining them mentally and physically. Depersonalization is defined as the feeling that a worker gets that they are losing themselves and their personality in their job. And personal accomplishment is the extent to which a worker believes that the work they're doing is making an impact and truly matters. When you have high levels of emotional exhaustion combined with high levels of depersonalization and low levels of personal accomplishment, you are at risk of burnout. Previous studies have shown that there is a positive relationship between emotional exhaustion and depersonalization, and a negative relationship between personal accomplishment and burnout. The big 5 personality traits are the following: neuroticism, which is defined as the tendency individuals have to experience stress and other negative feelings. The second is extroversion, which is the ability to approach problems in a positive manner. Next is agreeableness, which is defined as people who tend to be cooperative and trustworthy. People who possess the 4th trait, conscientiousness, tend to come across as orderly and responsible. And finally, people who have high levels of openness are often curious and original. The final component of my study is job satisfaction, which is the extent to which a worker believes that their workplace needs are met. I chose to include job satisfaction in my study because of its known relationship with burnout and personality. I'm sure you could imagine the more satisfied you are in the workplace, the less likely you are to experience job burnout. But however, when it comes to personality, the relationship is a bit more unclear because previous studies often contradict each other. Within the realm of service-related industry professions, such as teaching, it has been known that job satisfaction can correlate positively or negatively with neuroticism, and that goes to highlight what an important role the workplace plays in shaping the way that these associations display themselves. I'm sure you could imagine being a teacher versus a first responder versus a fast food worker are all incredibly different lifestyles, even though they all fall under the realm of service-related professions. That's why there's a dire need to address high school educators within the classroom specifically. Little is known about the relationship between personality, burnout, and job satisfaction among high school educators. And if we investigate this, it will be the first step to help combat the high turnover rate in the educational profession, because in the United States, we are in a teacher shortage. So my study had 2 main objectives, the first being to examine how the big 5 personality traits influence teacher burnout and job satisfaction, and also look at gender differences. During the literature search, it was seen in many other professions, women tend to be at a greater risk for burnout. And if that were proven to be true in the field of education, it would have detrimental effects because in America, education is primarily dominated by females. So my study used a survey-based design. The first was the NEO 5-factor inventory, which assesses the big 5 personality traits. Then the MASH/SAS burnout inventory, which assesses the total burnout score as well as the 3 sub-constructs: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. And then the final survey I included was the job satisfaction survey, which is a 36-item survey that evaluates the 9 facets of job satisfaction that I will discuss later. All 3 tools have high comeback alphas and have been validated assessment tools, which becomes a strength of the present study. I recruited via email and got a total of 104 participants in my study, all over 18 years of age, and they all signed an informed consent form, and I obtained IRB approval. As you can see here in the demographic table of the sample characteristics are shown. A limit of the study is that the sample characteristics are not generalizable, which means that results cannot be applied to the general population. When it came to data analysis, the tool I used was SPSS version 29. I ran Pearson correlations to assess how personality influences burnout and job satisfaction while making sure to control for demographic variables that were seen to influence outcomes, because I wanted to make sure the results I were seeing were not due to demographic variables, but in fact were because of an individual's personality. And finally, I ran a one-way ANOVA to assess gender differences. And I'm sure you can imagine, if you are in a profession for longer, you are more likely to be of a greater age. Therefore, we also saw similar trends when it comes to age, relationship with neuroticism, and conscientiousness. So what that all means is that we saw that newer educators are at a greater risk for burnout. This will be the big 5 personality traits: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And on top, we have the 9 subfacets of job satisfaction: pay, promotion, supervision, fringe benefits, contingent rewards, operating conditions, coworkers, nature of work, and communication. And then finally at the end, we have burnout, its subconstructs, and a total global score. As you can see, I had many significant results. Those highlighted in green are significant at the 0.001 level, those highlighted in blue are significant at the 0.01 level, and those highlighted in black are significant at the 0.05 level. So all the associations you just saw, I highlighted the main ones. Neuroticism is positively correlated with the known risk factors for burnout. Extroversion served as a protector against burnout, and agreeableness was associated with high burnout and high job satisfaction. And finally, conscientiousness positively correlated with job satisfaction. So what that all means is that individuals who possess high levels of neuroticism are more prone to stress, thus increasing burnout, whereas traits associated with friendly individuals, such as agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, will help facilitate workplace interactions, therefore making it easier for you to get along with your coworkers and increasing overall job satisfaction. This is the results of the one-way ANOVA I ran. So you have women on top and men on the bottom. And I used a similar key to circle results that were only shown between one gender. So all those results circled for the women were only seen in women and were not significant among men. And those differences are due to the fact that 4 out of the 5 traits actually varied significantly between men and women. So women as a whole tended to possess higher levels of neuroticism, agreeableness, and conscientiousness, whereas men tended to possess higher levels of openness. There was 2 major trends that were only present among women that actually made a huge impact on the study. The first being neuroticism and burnout, which were only strongly positively correlated among women. We also saw extroversion and burnout only correlate negatively within women, which means that women high in extroversion are less likely to experience job burnout, but women high in neuroticism are at greater risk for burnout. So these results have significant implications in America and even globally. When it comes to demographic variables, we saw that when it comes to age, younger teachers are at greater risk for burnout, and that goes hand in hand with work experience, because the more work experience you have, the more capable you become to deal with difficult situations. This actually falls in line with previous studies, which saw that lack of experience and difficulty adapting lead to poor job satisfaction in many different professions. In terms of the big 5 personality traits relationship to burnout and job satisfaction, we saw that neuroticism will lead to more burnout risk, the higher levels of neuroticism you possess, and in turn it also increases the risk of having low job satisfaction. This can be attributed to the fact that people who possess high levels of neuroticism tend to fall victim to the stress that work can place on them. Extroversion, conscientiousness, and openness all had similar relationships as a whole. So for burnout, these traits were a protective factor and they increased job satisfaction. This is in line with previous findings. Agreeableness was unique to my study because it actually displayed a relationship with burnout that contradicted previous work. So we saw it actually positively correlate with burnout, meaning that if you have higher levels of agreeableness, you are at an increased risk for burnout. And I attribute this to the fact that people who tend to be more agreeable will likely say yes to more work. And that creates a heavier workload, which in turn increases stress, and that can lead to burnout. However, we also saw a positive relationship with job satisfaction, meaning that people who are more satisfied in their job tended to have high levels of agreeableness. And I believe that can be due to the fact that when you complete that heavier workload, it can lead to a greater sense of accomplishment in comparison to other colleagues. So when it comes to gender differences, we saw that there were about 4 or 5 major trends absent among women, the 2 I mentioned before, and then these 4 new ones. So neuroticism was specifically a risk factor for burnout among women and not men. We also saw that openness and extroversion only protected women from low job satisfaction and burnout risk. And we also saw women displaying high extroversion tended to be more satisfied with the workplace. What that means is that women display prevalent correlations that are indicative of high burnout, meaning that in comparison to their male counterparts, they're at an increased risk to experience job burnout within the classroom. That can be attributed to workplace stereotypes, which often demand women to balance having a career as well as a home life to a greater extent than men, and that means that they're often required to be more outgoing and hardworking in order to receive similar treatment. 77% of educators in America in primary and secondary school are women. And that is alarming because, as I mentioned before, women are at greater risk. In future work, it should be performed in order to see why such discrepancies occur in a female-dominated profession. It would also be interesting to explore variations across school districts. So my study only looked at my school district, which is a public school district of medium size in New York. It would be interesting to see private versus public, the size of schools, as well as funding, to see how those things can impact teacher burnout and satisfaction. And this will help school districts provide more specific insight because, as I mentioned before, it really does all come down to the environment of the workplace. And environments differ heavily in America from school to school. So accounting for these confounding variables will help schools develop tools to help their specific teachers. Thank you.